IVM.
Well, I've been coming to Bombay when I was outside Bombay as well and traveling almost very frequently during the monsoons. But never ever did I assume that a flooding was a certainty. The last 4 years, we have had more flooding in Bombay than it has ever experienced in the last 42 years. And that's because flooding has become a mandatory component of monsoon today.
Hello and welcome to the Filter Coffee podcast. We're in a very critical time when it comes to the discourse on climate change, globally as well as in India. In 2015, after 20 years of trying and failing many times, 195 nations hammered out a deal that we know as the Paris Climate Agreement. The long-term goal of this agreement is to keep the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees centigrade, above pre-industrial revolution levels. 3 years on, it's become increasingly clear that the decisions are becoming more political by the day, and it is not going to be easy for us to get to where we want to by 2030. While the global narrative is dominated by America threatening to withdraw from this and the COP24 event that is happening in Poland as we speak, the Indian epicenter of this narrative has largely been in Delhi and Bombay. Bombay especially at the back of the Save RA protests, the killing of Avni, and the recent fire that we had in RA. To discuss this, we probably have one of the most controversial figures possible, and he's also a great friend. He's a veteran in the advertising and in the data industry, but lately he's been known more as an animal activist. Welcome to the show, Anand Siva.
Thanks, Karthik.
Anand, I've been following, what you've been saying, and also the larger discourse that's going on. And lately, both in your voice as well as with people around you, I sense that the urgency with which the discourse is happening has grown significantly. Right? What is happening and why are we at this stage where it is extremely critical that we do something about this?
Well, controversial you said, so let me live up to that name right from the start. Right? I think the urgency has crept in about 10, 12 years ago. So it's not something that's new, but technically, I think we are now conceding to the fact that the urgency is more universal than just geographic. 15 years ago, it was felt that the United States was the primary polluter and the contributor to the entire global warming scenario. And now increasingly, every country, every geographic unit is now discovering that they've played a big role in it. And now it's no longer just one country that needs to change the dynamics of slowing down climate change. It's now become a universal truth. And the universal truth has become bigger than what we thought would be the reality in terms of how soon a potential disaster was looking at our face.
When you say it's become bigger, then what has changed?
Well, lots have changed. For example, in the last 3 years, we've seen more erratic weather conditions than ever before. Completely unclimatic changes, as they call it, completely unseasonal occurrences, and a lot of natural disasters that remain unexplained, and saying why did they occur at the time that they occurred without a pre-warning. And the number of instances and the frequency of these disasters are a telling tale of how this is changing and how it's likely to impact over the next 3 years. And the next 3 years, I think, going to be the catchphrase for anybody who's talking about the environment going forward.
So I'm sitting in Bombay. We're having this conversation in car. What disasters have I been through? Anything that I know of that you are probably referring to?
Well, I've been coming to Bombay when I was outside Bombay as well and traveling almost very frequently during the monsoons. But never ever did I assume that a flooding was a certainty. The last 4 years, we have had more flooding in Bombay than it has ever experienced in the last 42 years. And that's because flooding has become a mandatory component of monsoon today. People in Bombay never feared a possible 3-day or a 4-day shutdown. Today it's become the norm.
But is that climate change or is it bad urban planning?
See, it's like this, right? Why is climate changing? I mean, let's understand that. Because if you blamed it on urban planning, then it's easy to say if I reverse the way I planned my city or my township, I can reverse global warming or climate change. It's not possible. The combined disastrous units of urban development have contributed to this. Good example is, as we speak, today there has been a clearance by the government to say, can I get rid of about 120 acres of mangroves around the Virar Vasai area. Now, when you displace mangroves, you're essentially displacing the flow of water. It acts as gate valves. Now, you're saying I'll open up the valves. I have no more control because I've taken off one natural valve to give way to another natural disaster, which is water coming in during floods. If they go ahead and the destruction, as they call, starts sometime in the month of January, which is the plan, this 2019 monsoon is a sure flooding monsoon. There's no doubt about it.
So this is what? This is some kind of development, or they're putting a railroad, or
they want to clear this up for township building.
Township, okay.
We call it development, but it's for township.
So you and many other people use the word biodiversity and biodiversity equilibrium. When you talk about these, right? What is biodiversity, and what is the equilibrium you're talking about?
I think the words, it's a fantastic word. When you say diversity, it automatically means there are multiple things that occur in the same place. Like we talk of cultural diversity because there are multiple cultures existing in the same society. So biodiversity is about multiple organisms, multiple life forms, and multiple, as we see, objects sitting together in one place, right? If you take the RA forest in Bombay, for instance, when you say biodiversity, you're talking of everything that constitutes that location. It includes the tribals there, it includes the hills, it includes the rocks, it includes every living organism, every tree inside that. And when one gets upset, it upsets the entire place, and which is why it's called the biodiversity equilibrium. In very simple terms, there is a very easy phrase to remember, and that's what works in our life, which is a tiger needs the forest as much as the forest needs a tiger. That is biodiversity.
And what is interrupting biodiversity? Or what are we doing to interrupt it?
You, me, sitting here in what was probably a forest once upon a time, gave way to a building. We are sitting and recording an interesting podcast out here. And that's what a forest that is being destructed today will happen. 2 years later, it will be another studio, another office, another mall. So we are disrupting all of that.
But tell me, see, no one sets out to disrupt wildlife, right? So I have two questions. One is...
Sorry, is that a question or is that a statement that nobody goes out to disrupt wildlife or destroy wildlife?
I'm saying the starting point is not that. The starting point is I have a species living in this city, and this species needs more space. So I need to build more houses. I need to build more working spaces. So I need to... The only way I can do that is by clearing forest, right? So that's the starting place, right? Are these the only things that affect biodiversity, like you're talking about, or is everything else I'm doing, as an individual in a city or in a town, also affecting it?
I think the first component that impacts biodiversity is another interesting word called speciesism. What does it say? It says, human as a species, am more superior to all other life forms on earth, and therefore I shall decide what is right and what is wrong. So the top of the pyramid assumed place that we have, and the atrocities we do on other life forms because we think we are a superior species is what speciesism is all about. And therefore it says my needs are more important and my needs are more diversified than a tiger or a pangolin or a rabbit in the wild, and therefore I will decide what I should do in my interest first. Which is why we think it's okay to take over a forest, not realizing that we have equal ownership of the forest as much as the wild animals and the birds inside the forest. So when you take it over and you say, I will decide what I can do for the forest because my apartments need to come up there, you've sort of taken over the rule of biodiversity there.
So hold on to that thought of speciesism. I'll come back to you on that if I can pronounce it again. But I want to go back to, since you mentioned tigers multiple times, and somewhere in this conversation we moved from climate change to tigers, right? So is Avni and what happened over the last 2-3 months, is that indicative of what's going on in biodiversity and hence the climate change discourse?
Yes, Avni has been a revolution, at least, especially for people like me who've been very closely working with the constituents of a tigress being killed, which means I've been working with the government. I've had a lot of interactions with the NGOs. I've had a lot of interactions with villagers, a lot of interactions understanding the corporate government nexus. All of this coming together.
Before you go into that, for those of the listeners who are not familiar with the Avni story, so it's basically a man-eating tiger in eastern Maharashtra who was gunned down by the government in fairly controversial situations. That's the one-liner, right?
That's a fantastic one-liner, the way the government would want you to say it. Because you started off with the word man-eating tiger. The controversy starts from even the way she was declared a man-eater. So the controversy starts from the fact that the government manipulated records to declare her a man-eater, to have her eliminated, to take over a forest that has been sold to the corporate world. So it's a nexus. I said it's a nexus of the government with the corporate, with the villagers, with the private hunter, with the NGOs, which opened up a Pandora's box of saying how closely all of these are entwined to create that little body of forest.
Fair point, but I'm not going into that. I'm saying the starting point in this discussion was she killed an individual, right? In fact, I think one of the stories was, I read somewhere that there's a 65-year-old woman and her 70-year-old husband were in their farm, I think it's a wheat farm, and the husband goes out to light a campfire to protect them against wild boars, etc. The next thing she knows is a tiger, the beast, is holding him by his neck, right? So this episode is what I'm referring to as a man-eating. I'm assuming that's what everyone else is referring to as well.
Yes and no. I don't know where you got this little story from, but I hope it's not a new story that is being planted, because we are reading news stories every day to defend the killing of the tigress.
I think this is one of the people they interviewed. I think multiple papers did this. Yeah.
So it's like this, right? Avni has never ventured out of the forest. So when you talk of biodiversity, when you talk of climate change, I think it's important to understand what this is all about. We have got about 18 square kilometers of land or forest land that has been encroached upon by the people. Right. So therefore, when you go into the encroached area, you're essentially not going into a farm. You're going into what the tiger thought was her forest. Right. So geographically, you're getting into a forest area. You're getting into the tigress's area. And when you go and disrupt that, when you go and take away, when you kill that forest, what you do? Essentially, you're taking away the prey for the predator. And therefore, the predator comes out in search of food. And therefore, it is now potentially called to be coming into a farmland. Right. And therefore, it starts creating a disruption in the man's life, because the farmer, instead of seeing a tractor there, is seeing a tiger.
Right.
And therefore, a series of reactions are set out. And then what follows is killing, or potentially an attempt to kill. And this is not about Avni, right? After Avni came into the picture, there have been close to 14 big cat deaths in India.
Oh, wow.
After, which is in about the last 5 months, we've seen more big cats being killed or dead than ever before. 2 days before the cubs of Avni were found, there were 3 cubs that were found dead on a railway track near Chandrapur. Right? These are all instances of the upsetting of the biodiversity. Because how did a tiger cub land up on a railway track? Now, did the tiger come to the railway track, or the railway track go through the jungle?
Right.
So when you start disrupting it at a very large scale, the human-animal conflict starts emerging at a very higher level and more frequency. And we just started seeing this. It's going to get even worse over the next. I think the next 3 years are going to be extremely, extremely important for our biodiversity.
So one thing I've understood, by reading the story around Avni is there are many things that are upsetting the biodiversity in India, but probably the most important one are the railroads and the highways, right?
Infrastructure, essentially.
But especially these two things, because they fragment a forest. Because you can't put a railroad through a forest. You can't put a factory through a forest, right? A factory will probably replace a part of a forest. But these railroads and highways are fragmenting the forests. And that is where suddenly, the cat finds herself in a track or in a road or in a house nearby a road, something like that.
Virtually caught in the headlamp of a car.
Right.
A week ago, there was a very bad case of a leopard that got hit by a truck. and she was lying in the middle of the road with a hip fracture, unable to move out. Till somebody actually got off a truck and moved her away from it by dragging her by her tail. She, of course, succumbed to it about 6 hours later. We're going to be seeing increasing references and occurrences of this.
Okay. But this is indicative of a larger problem. Avni is not a story by itself,
Absolutely.
but indicative of a larger... Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. See, indicative of the problem, in a way, it's very peculiar to India, is because we are overpopulating like crazy. We are like rabbits on the prowl. So we don't have enough place to accommodate the number of people. Give a very simple example, right? A family of 2 in Mumbai, when in 20 years, when the son grows up, when the daughter grows up, there's an immediate need for them to occupy one more apartment, which means you need to go somewhere. And there is only that much you can go vertically in a place like Mumbai. You start going horizontally. And then you need to buy one more car. And when that family is now suddenly got 3 apartments and 3 cars, you need to now have triple the number of road space, the number of parking lots, the number of shopping malls.
Fair.
So everything goes up almost triple. So in 20 years, you've actually tripled the need for every infrastructure need. And so therefore in 20 years, you would have obviously taken up 30% more forest land.
But this is why we created all this reserve area and all of that, no? Isn't that the whole point, that you develop elsewhere but don't touch the tiger reserve forest?
Yeah, we did that assuming
why isn't it working?
We did that assuming that the place we have kept for ourselves would suffice. Please remember, it's not just construction, right? When you say 3 times more people, you need to produce 3 times more food, which means you need to increase farmland under cultivation, right? Our needs have changed. We have now become a very different society. We no longer eat just the local crop or the local produce. We now want red pepper and yellow pepper in our food. We want zucchini. We want broccoli. All these foods never existed before. So as the fashionable eating trends change, farmers get into what's more lucrative, what's more productive, what's more unseasonal. Therefore, we've started changing everything. And that's what I think biodiversity is all about. Saying you go and impact the kind of crop that should actually grow. And then you think you can now impact. You won't impact because you're anyway growing. I'll give you a good example, right? What does the forest minister say every time he needs to take over the forest? He says, don't worry, I'm going to place some saplings. I'm going to plant 1 lakh saplings. And he shows us a completely arid area, right? What he has to remember is he can only place saplings there. He can only grow trees, but he can't grow a forest.
What is the difference?
There's a big difference. When the crop grows in a place, that forest grows based on the biodiversity that exists there. It creates food for the animals and birds that depend on the forest, which is why I said the forest needs a tiger as much as the tiger needs the forest. It's about the wildlife represented by the tiger, right? When you start planting, you plant saplings of your choice, right? You don't plant saplings that are designed for the lives that exist there that depend on those trees. You plant the same, it's like a grow. You just plant the same kind of trees across a large plot of land. That's not what a forest is. You'll never see the same kind of trees in one area in a forest. You'll find a variety of them, which is why they are called biodiversity. You can never build biodiversity. You can only destroy it.
Okay, fair. At this point, I want to go back to the whole speciesism thing that you spoke about.
Speciesism.
Right? Speciesism.
Yeah.
Okay. From an Avni perspective, right? Now, let's not call it a man-eater or anything else, but she has caused grave danger to the human species living in the place where unfairly she is now roaming around, right? What is wrong in a species protecting itself? By that, what I mean is the story I told you about the farmer who was killed. What is wrong in another person belonging to the same species hunting down an animal that killed this person?
I think that's exactly what speciesism is all about. The question I would ask you is, what is wrong in Avni killing a man because she was protecting her daughters?
I don't think the killing of Avni was, or the killing of the man, either of them, it's not like one was more morally correct than the other, right? But I'm just saying that it's a reaction, right? My species got killed, so I'm going to kill. Not because I want to morally prove a point, but that's how I protect my own.
If you did that in self-defense as an individual in the forest, right, and you acted according to your natural instincts, that works. But if you're actually landing up there with drones, with night vision binoculars, with vehicles that can take you in, you are sabotaging the entire effort of survival. You're going there with the forest under siege. I was there for 3 days in the forest before Avni was killed. That place was under siege. It was under siege. I was near Kolaba when the Bombay terror attacks happened. Actually didn't see any difference. I found about 150 commandos there. It was a war room. The battle room was happening right there. And that's not the way you protect yourself. That was an avengeful death. You went there with the objective of tracking down a tigress who was not to be found, right? And then you brought her down, and then you can't call it self-defense anymore.
But that's actually the example you gave is exactly what I'm talking about, right? When someone attacks my species, whether it is man or an animal, I'm reacting the exact same way. I'm causing a commotion, I'm getting all help I can, and I'm going into the forest or into Kolaba and killing the person who caused the danger.
Yeah, I think the difference is this, right? When a terrorist comes to my temple or my school and bombs me, then the intention is very different. That's invasion. When you go into a tigress's forest and then you get killed, you're reversing the trend, right? But before you get to taking a fair or unfair judgment on that point, there's something very important that you must understand. The ecographic of the Indian village has changed a lot. And let me tell you why, right? Today, if you have to set up a dairy farm, you need to spend only 30% of the cost, because 70% of the cost is subsidized by the government, right? What does it mean? It means the cost of setting up a dairy farm has now become cheaper. And it's a lot cheaper than buying land, mowing it, towing it, tilling it, and all of that. Therefore, it's easier money. All the villagers in the Yavatmal district that I went to, for example, the forest area called Ralegaon, there is Sarati, which is one of the villages there. They all are in excess occupation of dairy, right? I don't know if you've seen it.
Excess occupation of dairy.
Yeah,
as in more people are getting into the dairy.
Are into dairy already. In fact, in about 2-kilometer drive between Nagpur and Yavatmal, I counted about 22 peda shops. I've never seen that in anywhere in India.
Wow.
Right? So when I went there, I've got videos, pictures to corroborate all of that. When I went and spoke to them, they said, yeah, we have excess milk. We're only able to send out this much milk, and therefore we set this up as a specialty unit. So what chikkis are to Lonavla, these peda shops are to Yavatmal, which means there is excess milk. Now, when do you get excess milk? When you have more cows. And when you have more cows, you need so much more food. When you need so much more food, you need to allow the cattle to graze. Now, in that area where Avni and the tigress issues there, these animals, these cattle are taken into the forest area to graze because that is free and abundant food. So, obviously, when cattle go, unlike a deer, a cow can't run. Therefore, it becomes easy prey for the tiger. Right? Also, when you graze, again, going back to biodiversity, when you allow cattle to graze, you're destroying the biodiversity of the herbivore predators and prey that exist inside that place. Because a cow grazing, 200 cows going in and grazing over a 5-acre plot is very different from 500 deer grazing over a 500-acre plot.
How is it different?
Because they're going there with a focused intention. They only go there to eat and they come back. They don't contribute anything else to the biodiversity. Why the tiger needs the forest and the forest needs the tiger is the tiger allows you to keep the herbivore population in the forest under check. You disrupt everything every way. You encroach upon land. You have taken away the food that is available for the herbivore. When herbivores run short of food in the forest, they go to the villages. When they go to the villages, they are again easily killed. They get electrocuted, they are burned, they are trapped. They are killed for food because it's again free meat for the villagers. Right? So we have set in motion a series of acts that have become permissible now. Right? I'll give you one more example of what we have done. Right? I don't know if you're aware, but if you go on a railway track and you get hit by a train and you survive, what is the action that the railways can take on you? Or what is the action you can take on the railways for having it been run down by an engine?
I guess I'll probably get booked for jaywalking on a railroad. I don't know.
You get more than that, right? 7 years imprisonment is what the rule says.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Because you trespassed. That's railway property. It's like the equivalent of running onto the runway or running into a cantonment area. But when you walk into a forest, especially in Maharashtra, even if it is a protected forest, which is a violation, and you get killed, your family gets 15 lakhs. Technically, a government that is supposed to penalize me for having violated a law actually rewards me. and in a district, Yavatamal district was the highest in terms of farmer suicides last year. Is it any coincidence that you're also seeing the maximum number of so-called deaths in the forest for farmers who are anyway poor, who are getting rewarded for the oldest man dying in the family? So you need to stitch all of these together. You need to put the dots together and then say, is there something more than what we see and what we read? Is it more complex, or is it all just coincidence?
So, by extension, then anything that I do, right, near or significantly near that place is going to upset the ecosystem in one way or the other.
Anywhere,
Anything
not just
I
near
touch,
there,
any,
anywhere.
Any leaf I pluck is going to significantly affect it.
Absolutely,
right?
of course.
Is that wrong?
Absolutely. So if you're
My
a trekker,
point is-
are you a trekker?
I am.
You are. So the funda we use when we trek is LNT, which says leave no trail. Because when you go into the wilderness, that's the one part that you come back without letting the world know that you were there. Anything that leaves a trail means you've upset it in some way.
Okay, fair.
Right.
So, are we doing something significantly wrong compared to other countries? Where does India rank in all of this? Because we are not the only country that is developing at this pace, right? Is there any data to suggest that we're doing this more or less wrong than other countries?
First thing is, I think geographically, every country is different, right? The kind of wildlife you live with, the kind of occupations that you have, the kind of people that you have, literacy rates, dependencies, etc. India has a very peculiar problem, right? We still have villages that don't have electricity, right? While we're talking of 100% electrification, there are houses that don't have electricity, which means they are dependent on alternate sources of firewood, alternate sources of light, alternate sources of security, right? The reason I went to the forest is the forest minister kept giving an excuse that saying people are not able to go into the forest to, for example, children don't go out because they're terrified. So when I went there, and I was standing there in the village and I asked them where the school was, instead of pointing inside the forest, they were pointing to their back. So children were actually moving away from the village and not into the forest. Right? But no other country has these problems. We are sitting in a place where villagers find it convenient to go tell the government that they want the tiger killed because they want to take over the land. Gone are those days when these villagers were actually tribals and they coexisted with these animals. Right? United States of America, for all the animals that it has, does not have a tribal culture. And the president that they have now doesn't believe in an animal world. Right? To him, nothing exists beyond New York City, not even Washington, D.C. Right? The country is very peculiar, very, very peculiar. We have people of different socioeconomic classes. We still depend on the forest for firewood. We still have a very complex ecosystem there. I'll give you an example. When I went to the village, you will be surprised to know what their greatest aspiration is. The village of some 20,000 odd people, the greatest aspiration is to have a mall in the town.
In the village?
The town.
Okay.
And they know it's not possible in the village. And you know why? Because the portrait of a mall to the villagers by the government who goes there and says, I'm taking over land because I'll bring in prosperity to the town.
Excellent. Great. Hold on to that thought. Mall in the village sounds like the perfect time to take a break. We'll be back just after this.
Hello, everybody. It's been another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. Please follow us on social media if you aren't. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus talks to comedian Neville Shah about going to the same school as Freddie Mercury and how difficulties in life make for great comedic material. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam is joined by the very first guest he had on his podcast. Mahavir Chopra is the Director of Health, Life and Strategic Initiatives at CoverFox. They talk about new online ULIPs and why they're worth your investment. On How to Citizen, Meghnad and Shreya speak to comedian Abbas Momin, that's our very own Abbas, about understanding laws. They try to understand our free speech laws and what exactly is dissent. On the Filter Coffee podcast, animal activist Anand Siva joins Karthik Nagarajan to talk about animal cruelty and environmental conservation. On Geek Fruit, Tejas and Dinkar are joined by producer Janam to discuss the mind-effing films of Christopher Nolan. They talk about his beginnings, his first films, and the moment where he became the modern-day god of cinema. We have a Valentine's Day special on Advertising is Dead. Varun's guest is none other than his wife Pooja Johri, who is also CEO at The Glitch. They talk about how they balance their personal and professional lives, how she's made creative people work under a structure, and a lot more. On Golgappa, Rajshri Deshpande of Sacred Games fame talks to Tripti Kamkar about taking up challenging roles as an actor and her social work initiatives. And with that, let's get you on with your show.
Welcome back to the Filter Coffee podcast. Before the break, we were talking to Anand about a mall in a village, right? So Anand, I'm a family who's living in a village or a tier 2, 3 town like we call it, and I've not grown up in an urban setting or in a setting with a lot of wealth. And I'm dreaming about walking into a multiplex near my house. I'm dreaming about a retail experience that I don't have right now. Aren't these signs of prosperity? What is wrong in this?
Oh, absolutely signs of prosperity. But I think there's a big difference between getting the mall to the village and getting the villager to the mall. If there is an option, if you already have a developed hub close to the village, why would you not find urban dwelling units for the villager and give him the experience where it ought to be, and not say, I will take over every land that is available near the villager and convert a forest into a mall?
Is that not the choice of the people living in the forest? Aren't they inhabitants of their village as much as a tiger is an inhabitant of its forest?
Absolutely. That is where speciesism comes in. I'm saying when I exercise my right over the tiger, then it becomes speciesism. If it says the tiger also needs the forest, therefore can I build a mall elsewhere, becomes living in harmony.
No, you when you define speciesism, you defined it as I consider myself superior to another species, right? But this is survival of the fittest, isn't it? I can kill you and do this and protect myself, and hence I'm doing this. I don't think myself is superior to you.
That's the most heard argument. But saying when man does something, it's because he's got better survival instincts. He's been able to invent tools, technologies that has allowed him to get that supremacy on this planet. I think is all nice from a very self-ego boosting perspective. But if you go back and say the last 150, 160 years of the Industrial Revolution, the Green Revolution, the White Revolution, all the colors that have happened, have we progressed forward or have we gone backward? Right? And a good measure of this is saying, do we have enough resources today? Have we been able to conquer hunger? Have we been able to conquer poverty? Have we been able to conquer diseases? So in the last 45 years, have we had fewer diseases or more diseases? If you walk out and say there are more hospitals today than there are entertainment zones, then you know there is something going wrong in the way we live.
But I'll pick up something that you mentioned, right? You mentioned about the White Revolution, right? The White Revolution has addressed poverty. The cooperative societies have helped a certain group of people become more prosperous. Why is that wrong? Why do we have to pick from different causes?
Okay, you are now getting into another episode of your podcast in itself, because the White Revolution is probably, for people like me, the most dangerous thing to have happened, even bigger than the World War. Right?
Are you saying there is danger and peril behind the carton of milk that I'm buying almost every day?
Well, I am sure it's not almost every day. It is every day, right? And that is what every Indian does today, right? The White Revolution is surely one of the best examples of man-made disasters. We tend to think that it's going to be the nuclear bomb that's going to cause the largest eradication of human population in one given area. But what we don't realize is how the innumerable number of cows that we have in captivity, innumerable number of animals that we have in livestock. I'll give you a very simple example. India has got a livestock count of excess of 30 billion. Right? When you say 30 billion...
So this means 30 billion
animals,
cows,
animals are alive in captivity in some part of the country or the other. And this is excluding aqua life.
Okay, so that's 30 times the human population.
30 times the human population. Because that's the kind of supply you need. If you're going to be consuming chicken, let's say twice a week, it means you need to have enough chicken supplies happening, enough egg supply happening, enough meat, enough mutton, enough leather, and so on and so forth. Right? So when you have 30 billion animals, look at it this way. You're obviously producing 30 times more food than you produce for 1.5 billion people. Right? Because those 30 billion lives have to eat. When they have to eat, you have to take over forest land and convert them to agricultural land. When you cut down forest, we've been taught this from school, that when you cut down forest, you cut down opportunities for rain. So you created a vicious cycle where you now need to cut down forest because you need to feed the animals. And because you've done that, you're now running short of water. Now we are catching up. The question that you started off saying, where is the urgency? Now all of that we did is now catching up with us. We are now suddenly discovering a no water zone. Let me give you a very startling number. By the time this is out, we'll probably see impact of that. Bangalore and Delhi are likely to be zero water availability of zero water by 2022.
the way Cape Town ran out of water,
Right.
something like that.
Yeah. In 3 years, Delhi and Bangalore will go completely drinking water, groundwater, dry. Can you imagine what that would mean?
What would that mean?
Let's assume you are in Delhi. Take an instance where you no longer have water. The immediate decision that you would take is to migrate to a place that does not have a water problem. Right? You would say, can I shift base to Bombay?
But tell me something. I've been hearing this argument for the last 4 to 5 years, right? That Bangalore is running out of water, right? And at least in the main area of Bangalore, every apartment or rather every society has probably hundreds, if not thousands, of apartments at this point, right? There has been none of these apartments are running out of water right now, right? If there is an impending crisis, it's not going to happen one fine day, right? It's going to happen gradually. Why aren't apartments running out of water, or are they running out of water and we don't realize this right now?
I think 2 points there, right? One is we live in a mirage that we believe is all of this is not finite. So if we are not running out of water today, we will assume that we will not run out of water going forward, right? The question that you are asking, right? This is not something it's not like a switch on, switch off where suddenly on the 1st of January 2022, Bangalore is fully dry. It will start happening in the places where there is focused withdrawing of water. It will start there. It will move on. So when that happens, you will obviously create a massive disturbance in the society. People who are living in these dry zones will want to sell their apartment there and move to a place where there is no water problem, right? Now, will they find buyers there? They will not find buyers because nobody will want to move into a place which has already been called a dry zone, right? When that happens, you still have an apartment, you still have an EMI to pay. How do you pay the EMI? Because you can't sell your flat.
Okay.
Right? What I think, this is not something that has been brought out by experts, but if I can call myself an expert in this, I believe when the water problem starts is when you will start seeing the maximum number of urban suicides. The equivalent of what is happening to a farmer today, because he does not get enough from his crops, is why he commits suicide, because he can't make ends meet. An urban citizen will start committing suicide when he realizes that his debts are completely in a zone of irreversibility.
Or murders, right? But moving on to a slightly more realistic part of it, right? You mentioned forests multiple times in this conversation, right? If I'm not wrong, less than 5% of the landmass of India is what we refer to as the reserve forest, right? Now, much of the tiger population and the lion population, and correct me if I'm wrong, are restricted to this particular place. Now, when there is so much landmass available, why is development critical in this 5-10% of forests that we have, or reserve forests that we have? Why forests?
Okay, the first thing is I don't think we have enough land for our wildlife. One of the problems that we have is we have more wildlife than forest land, which is why the conflict between human and animal is happening in a large scale. Let me go back to my favorite forest subject, which is Avni. Right? If you picked up the forest map of Maharashtra and overlaid it with a minerals map of Maharashtra, you will find the story emerging. The entire forest where all of this is happening, the epicenter of the Avni issue, is extremely rich in limestone and coal. Right? Close to about 200 to 400 acres of land inside what is called as the Ralegaon forest has been sold to a cement company. It is awaiting forest department clearance. But it's already there on the government website as land sold for setting up a cement factory out there. Now imagine, here is a forest rich in minerals and you're allowing a cement company to come there. They can't mine with the trees on top. They can't go below and say, I will pull out the limestone for my cement factory. Therefore, the forest has to be leveled out. When you bring in a cement plant of that scale, you need to create socio-economic zones around it, which means you need to create dwelling units for your employees. You need to bring in a whole ecosystem around it. Therefore, you will have to occupy more land. When you sell land in a forest, you are actually saying, I am giving human need, which means my growing population needs more apartments, needs more cement, needs another plant, and has to bring in investments to show that as a government, I'm being progressively developing this region. And therefore, I'm compromising on the need for a forest over need for a socio-economic development purpose.
So you're extremely convinced in your mind that there is a political crony capitalism linked towards what's happening in terms of development in reserve forests?
Absolutely. See, the government has only
You don't think there is a natural, organic way by which this is happening? You feel there is a conspiracy?
See, it's like this, right? A government's job is not to arrest climate change or retain forest. A government's job is to do enough to win elections the next time, wherever they are. That is their purpose. Nobody says, I will do things this time, irrespective of whether I will win my elections next time. Right? They have to work towards retaining power. And the only way in a country like India you can retain power is by showing economic growth, by showing employment, by showing inflation control, by showing price control. And the government is not bothered about at what cost this comes. And that's what we are fighting against as conservationists, environmentalists, animal activists, etc., saying economic development at the cost of wildlife and forest destruction is not acceptable.
So who's we, at least at this point? And I know that you're at this point championing multiple causes. One of them has to do with making sure children know about what's going on. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I think we're living a very pseudo life as parents, right? I mean, I know I can breathe out knowing that I've taught my children the realities of life, but I don't think every parent does that. We aren't telling them the reality of life. We are preparing our children to become software engineers, to become architects, to become automobile engineers. Which is
also a reality of life.
It is a reality of life, but in 10 years later, I don't think the software engineer is going to be as lucky as the organic farmer is going to be. I don't believe that we're going to be living in a perpetual state of comfort being couch potatoes.
Maybe he'll be building the spacecraft that will take us to Mars.
Hopefully, and I'm hoping we won't do that because we've screwed up one planet. It's enough that we sit with that and not take our experience of this there and screw up Mars as well, right? But the reality is very different. Children aren't aware that they're going to inherit a planet that has got no forest, no wildlife, which means no clean air, no clean water, and no assurance of all of these natural resources being available infinitely, right? Fossil fuel is running out. Global temperatures are going up. Ice is melting faster. We are doing everything that is not showing signs of prosperity from a real perspective. Maybe financial prosperity, maybe economic prosperity as seen by economists, but not by environmentalists. And that degradation or that deterioration is the reason why we're saying let's go to schools, let's go to the kids and tell them that if they don't start demanding what they want to live in, which means I have a right to decide the kind of planet I must live in, is what the children must be asking. So we want children to become semi-union leaders and say demand what they want.
Hold on for a second. My nephew can't decide what action figure he wants. What is he going to know and how is he going to make the choice to say, I want to live in this kind of a world? What do you want as an outcome of a initiative like this? Did you want them to come out and say that? Aren't they going to just repeat what you're telling them?
I don't think so. So especially the effort that we are taking is not to go and tell them what they should do, but actually go and tell them what mistakes we made. We're going to go and tell them we thought all of us should go driving to office in one car each. We're going to go and tell them we never thought carpooling would bring down emissions in this country. We never told them that we should not be using plastic till the government decided to ban it. We never told them there were opportunities and substitutes available to live a cleaner life. So we have brought them up in a lifestyle that was ours, and we expect them to be able to thrive in the same ecosystem 10 years later. That's not going to happen. They must change, and that's non-negotiable from a child's perspective. And our idea is to provoke the child, not to the extent of doing research scientifically, to go back and say, what are those 10 small things I can do that makes me live better and gives me the assurance of clean water and clean air 10 years later.
And you think they can influence the behavior of the elders in the family? I mean, is that the end game?
Yeah, today the father buys the color shade of a car that the child wants. Right? Why is all advertising directed at children? When children ask, parents oblige. Now we just want to be sure the children ask the right things.
Right.
We want them to demand what is more important, not the color of the car or the model of the television they must have.
And this is so typical you. In fact, I think when we met a few years back, you were probably the biggest misfit in the entire advertising group that we met together in. And you had this badge called I'm Vegan. Is that what it says?
It says Vegan for Life.
Vegan for Life. And I think 10 minutes into a fascinating conversation, I realized that you are a militant of a different sort. Tell me, you started off as a regular advertising professional. You specialized in both creativity as well as data, like many of us. And at some point, there was a moment of truth which took you in this entire direction, first towards veganism, then towards animal rights, etc. How did that happen?
The animal started first. The veganism bug bit me quite a few years later. The animal bug hit me when we adopted a dog many years ago. It was to be given away to a shelter. We brought her home and we discovered she was being abandoned because she was down with jaundice. So she died in about a few months after we adopted her. But it changed our understanding of animals. In about three months, she got so devoted to me that I wasn't able to travel from Chennai to Bangalore without worrying about her starving till I came back. So 15 years ago, I used to do conference calls from Bangalore and talk to her so that she would eat.
Talk to a dog.
Yeah. And I realized that there was more to these lives than we ever saw. And that started my journey of understanding and respecting animals. Of course, then I have progressed considerably, that I've done 3 courses on animal communication today, and I believe that animals communicate much better than humans do. So the evolution of my understanding of the consciousness of the place we live in has changed considerably. It was about 2010, 2011 when I walked into a dairy farm near Bombay. And it was an expedition to do a raid because they were using drugs that were banned. But the experience left me completely shattered. So I walked out of the place at about 8 o'clock in the night, and 8:15 I decided I should have been vegan at least 42 years ago.
What happened there?
Well, I tripped over a calf, and I realized it was a male calf that was born that morning and left to die because the male calf had no role to play in a dairy farm. So then I realized that every glass of milk I was drinking was coming at the life of a male calf and the torture of a female cow.
But don't you need the male calf for the cows to eventually reproduce?
Well, it's like this, right? You don't need 10 bulls for 10 cows. You need 1 bull, so the remaining can go.
And the male calf is dead because it comes at a cost. You have to feed the male calf.
Serves no purpose.
Serves no purpose.
So we treat them as disposable objects, and they make good commercial sense as well, because the wheel is largest exported from India. So they come, and if you are wearing a Swede leather shoe right now, you must really comes from the skin of a young calf.
Wait, hang on to the thought. Wheel, India is one of the largest exporters of wheel.
India by all standards is the largest exporter of meat.
But cow
Also. Go back, right?
I'm just saying, going back to the conversation about cow as mother, God, etc. This seems like a fairly misplaced statistic in a country like this, no?
Oh yeah. So the question to ask is, if you're producing so much milk, we are the largest producer of milk in this world. Where is it coming from? It's obviously coming from cows. Now what happens to all those millions of cows once they stop lactating? They must be converted to something, and they're obviously not being cremated. So they end up as meat. They end up in slaughterhouses, irrespective of how we call them, whatever we call them in whichever language you speak. They are not what they are supposed to be.
Okay. So your journey starts like that, and then you continue on this by now very famous journey of veganism.
Yeah.
This is what, 9 years back?
Yeah.
9 years back. And how have you been? How has this changed you physically, mentally?
I think it's made me a more man at peace with himself, but it complete angst against the world I live in. It's transformed me physically a lot. It's made me lighter, fitter, healthier. The only time I go to a doctor is to have a fight with him for something else, and not got to do with me.
What do you mean? You don't go to a doctor otherwise?
It's been exactly 9 years since I've been to a doctor for any reason or taken a medicine for any purpose. I don't need to go to a doctor for that.
So you've not taken any medicine or seen any doctor for 9 years now?
Yeah.
So you've not broken a bone, had a fracture, had a fever?
So, yeah, there's nothing.
Had a terrible eye sore?
Yeah, there's nothing called a stomach upset or a viral fever or a flu as we think is okay to have. So, been lucky that way. I did have a very bad fall and had 2 ligaments that I snapped last year. But I still went through without surgery. I was supposed to go through surgery. I did do an MRI scan to look at the extent of damage, but I got it only through food. No medicines, no painkillers also.
You had a ligament tear.
2 ligaments tear.
And you just self-healed.
Yeah. I think that's what the body is capable of. What we underestimate is the power of the body. When you decide that food will be your medicine, you can reverse whatever you have. So now I've gone on this journey of helping people reverse what we think are okay to have lifestyle diseases. So I have more friends who have reversed diabetes, osteoporosis, arthritis. Right now there is interesting stuff happening around people reversing cancer as well. And that's through food and not through chemo.
So Anand, this has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
We started off with climate change, then we went into biodiversity, then to Avni, then to veganism, and somewhere along the line we spoke politics. So I'm living in Delhi. The listener, someone was listening to this in a city, probably driving in a car. What can I do about all of this? Right? How can I be useful in this?
Well, if you take global warming to be what it is, which means it is something that's happening at a global level. So it's not something that's happening at a local level. What we need are no longer small acts of change. It's not like saying I will never use this soap bar that comes in a plastic pouch, or I will stop using a plastic bucket. We are in a state where we need a complete reboot. And when I say reboot, we should have the courage to say, what can I do away with that will help me change the planet's temperature zones dramatically? When I say dramatically, we are talking dramatically. Right?
So no more incremental changes. I need to make a large-scale change to my lifestyle.
Yeah, the fact is, the last 35 years that global warming was put down as a threat, we have not managed to show anything incremental. We've only shown dramatic uprising of all the threats to the environment, ozone layer, coral reef dying, water temperature rising. We have not shown any factor that has showed slowness, right? Which means we have not done anything right, even in spite of knowing that there is a threat ahead of us. And we have come past that stage of small changes. We are now at a state of a complete reboot. And the reboot can happen only when there is a complete new thinking, right? So just go back to how you think on threats that man has faced, right? The fact is, no man in history has faced this threat before. Today we say declare war on somebody. You know what to do because we have seen war before. We've seen famine before. We've seen floods before. So we know exactly what disaster management is all about. But this is unlike anything that we have ever seen before. And the reason governments are not taking that step is the two. Right? One is they can't call the shots and tell the people that it's coming and hitting us very badly, because the first thing people want of a government is a solution. The government does not have solution. No government has a solution, and that's completely accepted by government heads themselves. Right? It's too big, it's too mammoth, and it's too drastic for a government to have a solution. And also the fact that they can't prove that the solution they have is going to work.
And also the solution is just probably delaying the inevitable, right?
Yeah, which is what they've been doing.
Even if I were to change multiple things, maybe eventually Bangalore will run out of water.
It will. Like, look at the craziness of government heads meeting to discuss what the impact of global warming is. There are 300 heads who have flown from all parts of the world. In the last 1 week, they would have contributed more to the emissions and global warming and carbon footprint than they would have done in the last 3 years.
Exactly.
So we're only doing it more to go and find out why we did it. Right? So it's sort of contra to itself.
So what if I were to take away 3 things? If you were to tell the listener, these are 3 things I can do to delay this, right? To be useful in this, what will they be?
I think first go back and say, what are your contributions to emissions? Because they are the ones that take away water, they are the ones that take away soil fertility, they take away air. And the largest contributor today is all the methane that is coming out of animals kept livestock. So when you go vegan, the first thing that you're doing is you are reducing the number of animals that are kept in livestock, which means apart from the overpopulated world of humans, you will start reducing the overpopulated farm animals that are contributing to all of this, right? Because when animals are in captivity, you need more food. Every day as we speak, we are losing about 3 football grounds of the Amazon forest every second. because land is being created for farming for animals and livestock, because our consumption of animal products is also going up. So you start reversing the number of forests that are being cut. You can slow that down dramatically.
By going vegan.
So
that's point one.
Right, that's point. The second is to go back and say, what is my use of plastics today? How much of those single-use plastics can I do away with? Can I go back to my years of 40 years ago, especially in a society like India, where you still had grocery packed in newspaper and tied with a jute string, carried in cloth bags at all? Is it possible to live that life again? I think it's absolutely possible. It was possible when they get banned, so why not do it before it gets banned? I think there are hundreds of substitutes available for all the avoidable plastics. You can't avoid the plastic in a car, you can't avoid the plastic in your mobile phone, but you surely can avoid all the other plastics, right?
The bottles in the office, the bottles in the hotel you go to.
Well, I think there's a lot more than just that. I think plastics are everywhere, right? The third thing is dramatically reduce what we consume. Last 5 years, I've never shopped in a supermarket. I never bought for soap. I never bought toothbrushes. I never bought laundry, soap, detergents.
What do you bathe in?
Water. And I use what is called besan, which is gram flour powder, which is ground by hand. So there is not even it's a mechanical device that grinds that besan for me. So there is not even that much energy that I use to get that besan out. If you go back and say, I will drastically reduce things I don't need to consume, that answers one of the points you made about saying was in advertising and data. And I realized that I had been driving people to consume things that they didn't need to buy in the first place. And we have made it a fashion today, saying you need a shampoo, you need a hair conditioner, and then you need a specialized lotion for your skin. And I have seen thousands and hundreds of animals that live beautiful lives without depending on one single unit of cosmetic.
Right. Now I remember that. I also remember you saying that you will not work on a campaign or with a client whose ideals you don't agree with.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So we've spoken about a lot of things that require deeper understanding, right? By going vegan, understanding climate change, etc. Are there any references you can share with the listeners? Where do I understand this in a simpler way? Or if there is a great book or a great online piece you read on this?
Well, I would go back to what I did when I moved out of advertising. I'd say don't believe anybody who tells you this in a book or on a website. Go read up yourself, get the numbers, get the facts, put them all on a sheet and decide what seems the right to you. Because every book has a book that goes against it. Right? Every school of thought has another school of thought. We could never have a single school of thought that everybody agrees upon. But I can promise you this, if you want to start slowing down, don't buy a book because that means one more tree cut down somewhere.
That is such an Anand Siva answer. With that, we'll end this episode. Thank you so much, Anand, for your time.
Thank you, Karthik.
That was Anand Siva. And if you want to follow him on social media, he is @Anand Siva on Twitter and pretty much on most other platforms. And @vegan all over. That's vegan ALLOVER on Instagram. So that was our show. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcasts.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are @IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I am _Karthik. That's Karthik with an H on Twitter. And filter_coffee. That's coffee with a K on Instagram.
How aware do you think you are of your laws and rights? Do you look up to laws when you are caught up in situations? Do you know what your rights are when you're stuck somewhere bad? Well, here's a show that can help you move an inch closer to being aware of what your rights are. Tune into Know Your Qanoon with me, Amber Rana. This is a podcast meant to answer all your law-related queries. Catch Know Your Qanoon every week on the IVM website or the app or anywhere you get your podcast from.
Did you know that Parsis in Mumbai, instead of being left at the Tower of Silence after they die, are now cremated? And why? Because a cow fell sick in the early 1990s. Did you know that the smog in Delhi is caused by something that farmers in Punjab do and that there's no way to stop them? Did you know that there wasn't one gas tragedy in Bhopal but 3? One of them was seen but 2 were unseen. Did you know that many well-intentioned government policies hurt the people they're supposed to help? Why was demonetization a bad idea? How should GST have been implemented? Why are all our politicians so corrupt when not all of them are bad people? I'm Amit Verma, and in my weekly podcast, The Seen and the Unseen, I take a shot at answering all these questions and many more. I aim to go beyond the seen and show you the unseen effects of public policy and private action. I speak to experts on economics, political philosophy, cognitive neuroscience, and constitutional law so that the insights can blow not only my mind, but also yours. The Seen and the Unseen releases every Monday. So do check out the archives and follow the show at seenunseen.in. You can also subscribe to The Seen and the Unseen on whatever podcast app you happen to prefer.